So we're at the end of a dirt track, about 100 meters long, on the outskirts of Pokrov, which is about 100 kilometers east of Moscow. And at the end of this road is the penal colony number 2 in Pokrov, where Navalny is serving out his 2.5-year prison sentence.
And honestly, if we didn't know there was a prison here, there's no way to tell. Because apart from the little guard shack at the entrance, there's nothing really to mark what it is. We can only guess what's inside really.
Welcome to The Poisoning, an AFP podcast. Episode 1, The Crackdown.
My name is Andrea Palasciano. That was me you were hearing outside the prison. I was there with my colleague Jonathan.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Brown. We're journalists working for the global news agency Agence France-Presse in Moscow. And we've been closely following the story of Alexei Navalny, one of Russia's most prominent opposition figures of the last decade. But this prison is now as close as most people can get to him, and it's as close as we can get to speaking to him.
His life has seen moments of high political drama. His corruption investigations made headlines. He led the largest demonstrations in years. He was also the victim of a shocking poisoning.
And I think nobody knew what would happen to Alexei Navalny. Would he survive? Would he die?
It is extremely painful and terrifying to be dying, because this is what you feel. When this happens, you feel like you're dying. When this happened to me, I was absolutely certain that this was the end.
In Russia, Navalny is a divisive figure. Some admire him, some pretend he doesn't even exist. But at home and abroad, he's seen as President Vladimir Putin's main adversary.
This podcast is about Navalny, but it's more than the story of one man. It's also about Putin, who recently changed the constitution to extend his 2-decade rule. It's about upcoming parliament elections in which the opposition is sidelined. And it's the story of Russia, Europe's most powerful and unpredictable neighbor.
In this episode, we'll tell you about a historic crackdown in Russia. First, about the crackdown on Navalny, then the crackdown on his organizations, and finally, the crackdown on his allies and his supporters.
This is the slogan of a modern type autocracy. 80% propaganda, 20% violence.
Okay.
Спасибо. Хорошо.
Спасибо. So we're standing outside the prison, and 2 policemen have just approached us and asked us to take a few steps back. 2 guards wearing full camouflage, one carrying a large AK-47 Kalashnikov assault rifle.
I didn't see the rifle.
Yeah, and the other.
I focused on the dog.
And the other with an Alsatian at the end of the leash just approached us and asked us to take a few steps back.
Quite politely, but still very firmly. Navalny was arrested in January 2021, but managed to bring thousands of Russians to the streets. He posted a video calling on his supporters to rally. Navalny is tall, with short blonde hair and blue eyes. And in the video he recorded from police custody, he's hunched over, close up, and staring right at the camera.
Don't be silent. Resist. Protest. No one will defend us except ourselves.
Navalny's call sparked demonstrations across the entire country. But the police came out too, violently dispersing and detaining demonstrators. These were some of the biggest rallies Russia had seen in a decade. Across the country, more than 10,000 people were detained. This was just the beginning of a sweeping crackdown on voices critical of the Kremlin. The timing was important. It came just months before parliamentary elections in September 2021. People have lost their jobs for going to the demonstrations. Independent media have been pressured to close. Prominent opposition figures face prison time. Many have fled the country.
Navalny was transferred to the prison in Pokrov in March 2021. This penal colony is one of the harshest in Russia. It's part of a legacy of the Gulag prison system during the Soviet Union. Navalny was sentenced to 2.5 years because of an old fraud charge. His allies say the sentence was politically motivated. Conditions there are bad. So bad that in the spring of 2021, Navalny launched a 24-day hunger strike. His doctors feared for his life. Earlier, we were outside the prison, but we wondered, what's life like inside? To get a better sense of this, I met Konstantin Kotov. He's a 36-year-old political activist who was released from the same prison just a few weeks before Navalny arrived.
Психологическая травма, она у тебя все равно осталась. В отношении меня там были еще дополнительные меры воздействия.
The psychological trauma stays with you your whole life.
Например, всем остальным осужденным, которые находились рядом
I was put under additional pressure. For example, other inmates were not allowed to talk to me. I had no one to talk to, only the guards or my lawyer when he sometimes visited. Psychologically, it's just hard and unpleasant.
Просто психологически тяжело и неприятно.
In Navalny's case, he also complained of being woken up hourly at night and denied proper medical care. But why is the prison like this? Kotov feels these conditions are part of a strategy.
Ты уже не прежний человек, который был до всего этого. Ты уже
Once you've been through this, you see and experience everything differently.
по-другому все переживаешь, и как минимум, может быть, живешь.
At a minimum, you live with more fear, and that's the authorities' goal, to intimidate people.
Вот таким образом запугать людей.
Once you understand the consequences, you think twice before you take to the streets or do something.
После этого несколько раз задумаешься, выходить ли на улицу, делать ли что-то.
For Kotov, experiences like this are how the authorities send a message. And that message is, don't go to the streets, don't speak out. And observers say it's not just about Navalny or Kotov.
At the moment, I think the lightest term that can describe it is depression, demoralization, and a general feeling of hopeless defeat.
I asked Ekaterina Shulmann, one of Russia's most respected political scientists, whether the Kremlin's message had reached the opposition at large.
The public anxiety is very high, and it's surprising that, or maybe not so surprising, that among the fears that the respondents list, the fear of state repression have grown so high. So it's no longer a fear limited to some strata of educated Moscovites or some nervous intelligentsia. It became a mass mood, which does not correspond very much to reality. It's rather been about creating an impression. And this has been so successfully achieved. It's amazing. How to create an impression while doing not so much. You see, this is the slogan of a modern type autocracy. 80% propaganda, 20% violence.
That violence was best on display at the beginning of the year at the protests called by Navalny. The massive police crackdown during those rallies also showed that, for the Kremlin, this was about more than one man. 10,000 demonstrators were arrested. Videos on social media showed police randomly taking people from the crowds and hitting protesters. Amnesty International said the response was designed to, and I quote, have a chilling effect.
The authorities said the rallies were illegal or violated pandemic rules. To understand the government's position, I spoke to Piotr Tolstoy, who is a senior figure from Putin's party.
My name is Piotr Tolstoy. I'm the vice chairman of the Duma, the lower chamber of the Russian parliament.
In case you were wondering, he's the great-great-grandson of Russian writer Leo Tolstoy.
Donc, si vous imaginez que, par exemple, ce qui concerne la violence policière.
When people say there is police violence in Russia, I say that in Russia we don't use bullets against protesters, nor gas or water in winter, as was the case in Germany, or in France against the Yellow Vests.
En hiver, comme ça a été le cas en Allemagne, ou comme ça a été le cas en France contre les Gilets jaunes.
So when it comes to violence in Russia, there isn't the level of violence that exists in Europe today.
Il n'y a pas cette grade de violence qui existe aujourd'hui en Europe.
Activists also say people are being pressured even before protests start. This is what Armen Aramyan told us about the January 2021 demonstrations. He's 24 and an editor at a student newspaper in Moscow called Doxa.
We got messages from students of more than 60 universities that stated that they were threatened that if they go to protest, that they will be expelled, or school students were threatened through their parents. And we were really amazed by this massive machine of kind of terror and basically trying to scare young people like us.
In response, Armen and other Doxa editors put out a video telling students they shouldn't be afraid to express political views. Then, early one morning in April, police raided the homes of several editors and Doxa's newsroom.
And basically, yeah, they went through all of our stuff, and then they put me at the table, and they tried to make me tell the code of my iPhone, code of my iPad. I refused to tell it. The policeman hit me a few times, but it was not in a kind of a painful way, but it was kind of this threatening way, like tell it, stop kidding around, and stuff like this. But I didn't.
I met with Armen at his apartment because he's effectively under house arrest and forbidden from using his phone. Armen told me the raid he experienced is part of a bigger picture, the same crackdown on protesters and on Navalny.
It's not a warning only for me or for Doxa, it's a warning to all Russian independent journalists that cover political issues, that cover corruption, that cover political censorship. It's a warning, stop doing your job, it's dangerous.
Stop doing your jobs. That was the message to Navalny's team when the authorities accused their organizations of being, quote, extremist. The label forces groups to close and also bars members from running in elections. With Navalny already in jail for several months, this marked the beginning of efforts to shut down his movement.
Ivan Pavlov is the main lawyer who defended Navalny's groups. Andrea went to meet him near St. Petersburg.
Andrea, очень приятно.
Очень приятно.
I came to see Ivan Pavlov at his dacha, so it's a holiday home. And it is quite an idyllic place on the sea. It's very close to Finland. Their dogs are running and playing in the water.
Pavlov is not allowed to use his phone, the internet, or the mail. I had to go through his organization and his wife to arrange the interview. He told me about the morning the police came.
It was knock, knock, knock. Knock, knock, knock. I wake up and just ask what's happened. And the investigator behind the door just told me that he has a court permission to come into my room and make a search.
How did you feel when that happened?
Oh, I'm a lawyer. It happens. I understand that we work in such not friendly environment. I have to be prepared for such an event, but, it's hard to be prepared for this, totally.
I asked them what would happen if they lost the extremism case.
It's very bad, really very bad, because most important is people who work, who cooperate, who donate, who support, who follow this organization. And they can be prosecuted in a criminal way and recognized like criminals. And this is a target for the government. It's not just to close one organization and problem is over. No, it's people. People who look and think differently than the government.
But we are talking about hundreds or thousands of people.
I think the 100,000s, actually.
Is it possible to prosecute hundreds of thousands of people?
No, it's hard, but, it's like to put some person on a hook, that to have possibility, to make them be afraid. Some people migrate, leave the country. And already many people left the country because of they saw such a possibility, And I hope somebody stay here. I stay here.
The ruling came in June 2021, about a week after I met Pavlov. Navalny's groups had no doubt what the outcome would be. They even disbanded before the ruling to protect supporters from prosecution.
Late on June 9, the prosecutor's spokesman walked out onto the steps of the Moscow City Court. He told journalists waiting outside that Navalny's groups had been banned. It was the end of a political era. And Pavlov, around 3 months later, he announced that he too had fled Russia.
In episode 1, we heard about the historic crackdown in Russia, culminating in Navalny's arrest and the closing of his organizations. The opposition was left without a base to continue their work and without their most outspoken figure.
In episode 2, we want to tell you how we got here. We want to take you to Siberia to tell you a story that Navalny, in his own words, likens to a Hollywood movie.
Привет, это Навальный.
Hey, it's Navalny. This poisoning story is crazier than a Hollywood movie, and you still have no idea how crazy it is.
So come with us to Siberia for episode 2 of The Poisoning, Novichok.
Thank you for listening to AFP's long-form podcast, The Poisoning. We hope you enjoyed the episode.
If you liked it, tell your friends and rate it wherever you're listening. For more from AFP, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. From Moscow, I'm Jonathan Braun.
And I'm Andrea Palasciano. See you in episode 2.